There were two kinds of silence. The peaceful kind, the one you seek out on a quiet morning, and then there's the other kind, the silence that screams inside your head when you're lying awake at 3 a.m. For over a year, I lived with the second kind. It was the silence of a secret that was eating me alive. A secret about my own brother, the person I loved and trusted most in the world. A secret he built using my life savings, my trust, and my name. The question wasn't if it would all fall apart, but who it would destroy when it did.
That's the voice of Jessica Lee from Philadelphia, a woman who found herself at an impossible crossroads between family loyalty and personal integrity. What do you do when doing the right thing means betraying the person you love most? I'm Susan Bentley, and this is Unbroken Women, where we share the stories of women who faced the unimaginable and found the strength to redefine their lives. Jessica's journey is a powerful testament to the quiet courage it takes to choose your own truth.
Before the screaming silence, my life was tidy, predictable. I worked as a graphic designer for a small firm in Philly. I had a nice little apartment, a circle of good friends, and a family that was the absolute center of my universe, especially my older brother David. To me, David wasn't just my brother. He was the sun our family orbited. He was brilliant, charismatic, and ambitious. When he told me he was finally starting his own sustainable tech company, I was his biggest cheerleader. I remember the late nights I'd bring him coffee at the tiny office he was renting, listening to him talk about changing the world. It felt like we were in it together. So when he said he needed a little more seed money to get a critical contract, I didn't hesitate. I gave him my savings, all of it. It wasn't a fortune, but it was everything I had painstakingly put away. I saw it as an investment, not just in a company, but in him, in us, in our family's future. I was so proud. I'd tell my friends, my brother is building an empire and I helped lay the first stone. It was the story I told myself, the one that made my ordinary life feel part of something extraordinary. The pride I felt slowly began to acquire a strange, heavy texture. It started with little things. David would be on a call and quickly walk into another room if I entered. When I'd ask specific questions about suppliers or the new investors he mentioned, his answers became vague, coded in business jargon that was clearly meant to deflect, not explain. He'd laugh it off. Jess, don't lower your pretty little head about the boring stuff. Just get ready to be rich. I'd smile, but a knot would tighten in my stomach. The weight wasn't a sudden crash. It was a slow, creeping flood. It was the feeling of being on the outside of something I was supposed to be on the inside of. It was the constant, low-grade anxiety that told me the cheerful story I was telling everyone and myself had missing pages. I was performing the role of the proud, supportive sister, but behind the curtain, I was shrinking, my intuition screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday. I was helping David sort through a box of paperwork he'd brought home, mostly receipts and marketing materials. At the bottom was a folder labeled Personnel. I opened it, thinking it was resumes. Instead, it was a list of employees, and next to their names were hourly rates that were shockingly low, well below minimum wage for contract workers. I asked him about it, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, that's an old list," he said, snatching the folder away. "We use an overseas contracting agency for that stuff now. It's all above board." But his eyes didn't meet mine. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of those names and numbers was burned into my mind. I thought about the people on that list. Did they have families? Were they being paid enough to live? For the first time, a dark thought surfaced, a whisper from a part of me I had kept silenced. What if the world David was changing was just his own? What if the foundation I was so proud of was built on something rotten? The whisper became a roar a few months later. A certified letter arrived from me, from the state's Department of Labor. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a formal inquiry stating that an investigation was being launched into Lee Innovations for wage theft and fraudulent contractor classifications. My heart hammered against my ribs, but the true terror hit me when I read the second paragraph. My name. It was listed right there, next to David's, as a founding partner and fiduciary. It said that multiple seed funding transfers had originated from a joint account in both our names, an account I never knew existed. The letter demanded my presence at a preliminary hearing. I felt the air leave my lungs. I called David, my voice shaken so badly I could barely speak. He was calm, too calm. "Jess, relax," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "It's just a formality. A disgruntled contractor's making waves. I had to list you on some of the initial paperwork to secure the loans. It's a legal thing. Just tell him you handled the creative side and you don't know anything about the finances. It'll be fine." But it wasn't fine. He hadn't just used my money. He had used my identity. He had wrapped his lies around me so tightly that I was now part of the deception. I was no longer just a silent supporter. In the eyes of the law, I was a potential accomplice. The floor beneath me didn't just crack. It vanished completely. My first instinct was to obey, to do exactly as David said. For a week, I lived in a fog of denial. He's my brother. He wouldn't intentionally put me in harm's way. This is all a misunderstanding. I repeated these phrases to myself like a mantra, trying to drown out the blaring alarm bells in my soul. Fear was a physical presence. It sat on my chest at night, making it hard to breathe. I'd imagine standing in a courtroom, a lawyer asking me questions I couldn't answer. I imagined my face in the news. My parents. God, what would this do to them? They adored David. They saw him as the fulfillment of their American dream. If I did anything, if I said anything, I wouldn't just be questioning him. I'd be detonating a bomb in the heart of my family. The shame was suffocating. Shame that I had been so naive, so blindly trusting. Shame that I was now tangled in this web. I wanted to rewind time, to go back to being the proud sister with the tidy life. The thought of confronting the truth was so terrifying, so cataclysmic, that for a few days, pretending everything was fine felt like the only way to survive. The breaking point came on a Saturday night. I was at my parents' house for our weekly dinner. David was there, laughing, telling stories about his company's incredible growth, accepting my father's proud pats on the back. He looked over at me and gave me a little wink, a conspiratorial gesture that was meant to be reassuring, but in that moment it felt like a splash of ice water. He was performing, and he expected me to be his silent, smiling co-star. I looked at my parents' trusting faces, glowing with pride for a son whose success was built on lies, and something inside me just shattered. I excused myself, went into the bathroom, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. Her eyes were hollow, filled with a terror I couldn't hide anymore. The weight of it all, the lies, the exploited workers, the legal notice, my complicity, crashed down on me. I slid down the wall, curling into a ball on the cold tile floor, and a sob ripped through me, raw and animalistic. It wasn't just crying, it was a deep, guttural purge of a year's worth of swallowed fear and denial. In that moment, on that bathroom floor, I knew. I couldn't live like this. The choice was no longer just about protecting him. It was about saving what was left of me. Leaving my parents' house that night felt like a funeral procession. The drive home was silent, but my mind was a battlefield. Every argument for staying silent, family, love, loyalty, avoiding catastrophe, was at war with a single, clear voice that had finally broken through. This is wrong. By the time I walked into my apartment, the war was over. I knew what I had to do, and the knowledge was both liberating and utterly terrifying. I was going to expose him. The word itself felt like a betrayal, a poison on my tongue. I was choosing my conscience over my blood. I knew it would shatter my family. I knew it could mean David's ruin, maybe even prison. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that in their eyes, I would become the villain of this story. The decision wasn't made in a moment of anger, but in a place of profound grief for the family I was about to lose, and the brother I thought I knew. The next morning, my hands were still shaken, but my resolve was firm. I looked up attorneys specializing in whistleblower and business fraud cases. I found one with a good reputation and a kind face on her website. Making the call was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every number I dialed felt like a hammer blow against the foundation of my life. I used a pay-as-you-go phone, my heart pounding with every ring. When she answered, I could barely get the words out. I didn't even use my name at first. I think I have information about a company engaged in fraud, I whispered, and I might be implicated. There was a pause on the other end, and then a calm, professional voice walked me through the first steps. We scheduled a confidential consultation. When I hung up, the feeling was bizarre. It was a dizzying cocktail of terror, and underneath it all, a tiny, unfamiliar flicker of relief. I had taken one step out of the screaming silence and into the terrifying unknown. I had betrayed my brother, but for the first time in a year, I hadn't betrayed myself. The fallout was immediate and brutal. After my consultation, my lawyer advised me that the first step was to respond to the Department of Labor, signaling my intent to cooperate fully. This meant telling my family what I had done. I told them together, at their house. The memory is a blur of shouting and tears. My mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing, begging me to take it back. "He's your brother, Jessica. How could you do this to your own blood?" My father, his face a mask of cold fury, pointed a shaking finger at me. "You have brought shame on this family. You are no daughter of mine." But David's reaction was the worst. He didn't yell. He was cold, calculating. He looked at me with dead eyes and said, "You were always jealous. You couldn't stand to see me succeed. You're trying to ruin me because you have nothing." He listed every favor he'd ever done for me, every gift, twisting years of love into a debt he was now calling due. He threatened to countersue me for slander, to tell everyone I was an unstable, vindictive liar. It was a masterclass of manipulation, designed to make me feel small, guilty, and crazy. I left their house that day and knew I had been excommunicated. My family, my history, my entire support system, it was all gone in an instant. The silence that followed was a new kind of awful. It wasn't screaming anymore. It was empty. My phone stopped ringing. Texts went unanswered. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant pressure in my chest. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed and the what-ifs would swarm me. What if David was right? What if I was just jealous and bitter? What if I'd made a catastrophic mistake and destroyed my family for nothing? The temptation to call them, to beg for forgiveness, to recant everything just to end the isolation was immense. It felt like an addiction, a craving for the familiar pain of my old life, over-the-shop, terrifying agony it is no one. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I had stood up for what was right, but I had never, ever felt more wrong. My lowest point came about 2 months into the investigation. The story had been leaked to a local business journal. It was a small article, but it was enough. My name was in print. The narrative David was spinning began to take hold. I was the disgruntled family member, the unstable sister. I lost a freelance client over it. At the grocery store, a neighbor I'd known for years averted her eyes and hurried away. I came home to my empty apartment, the legal bills piling up on my counter, and I just broke. I sank to the floor, completely hollowed out. I had lost my family, my reputation, my savings, everything. For what? For some abstract principle of integrity? It felt like a sick joke. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over my lawyer's number. I was going to call her and tell her it was all a mistake, that I was confused, that I was dropping it. Surrender seemed like the only option left. The fight was gone. I had nothing left to give. I was alone, and I was done. As I sat there on the floor, phone in hand, an email notification popped up. It was from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, "Thank you." I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. The message was short. I read the article. I was one of the contractors who worked for your brother's company. We were all afraid to speak up. My father lost his pension investing with him. You have no idea what your courage means to people like us. Don't let them silence you. I read it once, then again, and a third time. It was as if a light had been switched on in the darkest room of my soul. It wasn't about an abstract principle anymore. It was about this person. It was about their father. My sacrifice suddenly had a face, a name, a reason. It wasn't a grand rescue, but it was enough. A tiny, flickering ember of strength reignited inside me. I deleted my lawyer's number from the call screen. The war wasn't over. That email changed everything. It didn't fix my broken heart or my fractured family, but it gave me a purpose beyond my own pain. The climb back was slow, and it wasn't graceful. I met with the investigators and gave them everything I had. Documents I'd found, conversations I remembered, timelines. Testifying was grueling. Facing my brother's lawyers who tried to paint me as a liar. But this time, I wasn't speaking just for myself. I was speaking for the person who sent me that email. I started setting small goals. First, find a new freelance client. Then, join a yoga class to get out of my apartment. I found a support group for whistleblowers online. People who understood the unique hell of being ostracized for telling the truth. Slowly, carefully, I began building a new foundation, one that wasn't based on family ties or external approval, but on my own hard-won integrity. I learned to set boundaries, to trust my own judgment, and to nurture the fragile, recovering spirit within me. The legal process eventually concluded, David's company was dissolved, and he faced fines and legal repercussions. There was no victory party, no celebration, just a quiet, profound sense of peace. My victory wasn't seeing him punished. It was the liberation of my own soul. Today, I volunteer for an organization that helps victims of financial fraud. I'm not the same woman who used to bring her brother coffee. That woman needed everyone's approval. This woman only needs her own. I'm calmer now, stronger. I've discovered that my own conscience is the only home I truly need. The silence in my life now is the peaceful kind, the kind you earn. It's the sound of a spirit that is, finally, unbroken. If I could speak to that woman, the one cowering on the bathroom floor, I would tell her this. You are about to walk through fire. You will lose almost everything you think you cannot live without. But what you will find on the other side is the one thing that can never be taken from you, yourself. I tell her that true loyalty isn't blind. True loyalty is to your own truth. Integrity is your greatest inheritance, even if it costs you everything else. And it is worth the price.
An incredibly powerful story of moral courage from Jessica Lee. Thank you, Jessica, for your honesty. Her journey reminds us that sometimes our greatest act of love is being true to our own conscience. If Jessica's story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Unbroken Women for more stories of resilience, and click here to watch another incredible journey of transformation. Thank you for listening.